Welcome to the New Masculine Podcast. This is a place where masculine identifying people come together in community to disrupt outdated models of masculinity and together construct new models for our way forward as men. As a special note, while this conversation is between men, this podcast values all beings and seeks to create positive impacts for all. I'm your host, Travis Stock. I am a master life coach, an Equus coach, which means I often partner with horses when supporting clients, and I'm a teacher. In my coaching work, I am passionate about the balance of masculine and feminine energies in each of us, regardless of gender. I seek to help others nurture a relationship with both types of energy, which often leads to a greater sense of wholeness. And yet what I found in my work with men is that many of us have been taught messages about what it means to be a man by first teaching us to avoid anything that is associated with the feminine. That avoidance leads to few experiences of intimacy, emotions outside of anger, vulnerability, or even a sense of belonging. Striving to comply with these models of masculinity has many of us feeling isolated, ashamed, unworthy, afraid, angry, and depressed. That's why I started this podcast, to bring men together who are ready for something new, something more whole. Hey, just jumping in real quick before the start of this episode. I've got a few opportunities coming up in my work, especially around the horse work that I do, that I want to share with all of you so that you can start to look at whether or not this fits into something you want to sign up for. On June 21st, I'm offering a workshop called Create Thriving Relationships in the Seattle area. I don't know about you, but the world can feel really hard at times. There's a lot of challenges out there. We're all navigating a ton of stuff. And I find myself personally leaning into my community, leaning into my relationships as a way to help me navigate that. And I want to make sure that other people have those resources to do that as well. You know, relationships are tricky. Sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes we have ruptures in relationships. Sometimes they don't always work as smoothly as we want. And so this is going to be an opportunity to work through all of that. So if you're interested in creating relationships that both help you thrive and help the people in your life thrive, this is a fantastic opportunity to explore some of your own relationship patterns and to work on how to really take those relationships that are working, but maybe not exactly where you want them to be, and help them improve, help them take them to the next level so that you can really thrive in this world, regardless of what's happening in the external world. The next opportunity is on August 9th. What I'm calling a demo day. It's a low investment, low cost way for people to experience what Equus Coaching even is. I tried putting a lot of words to help people understand why I work with horses, and sometimes it still isn't clear to people. It's very much an experiential form of learning, and so until you get into the experience, it's hard to even really understand why I would go out and hang out with horses to work on relationships or to do men's work kind of stuff. So this is a really low cost, low investment kind of way to experience it. During the day, I'm working with a co-facilitator, and we're going to be demonstrating some of the work we do with horses, some of the interactions, discussing why horses are really important in the work that we do and what they allow us to do with people. And then a participant or two is going to get a chance to get in there and get an Equus coaching session in front of everybody so everybody gets to see what it really is. There's so much learning that can happen if you're one of those participants that gets to be in the round pen with the horse. But you'd be shocked how much you can learn from observing somebody by not being the one on stage, by not having to deal with your own perfectionism or performance anxiety. You're really going to get a chance to see what this work is and maybe even empathize with somebody in their experience. So again, that's August 9th. That's a demo day here in the Seattle area as well. I'm going to put links to both of those in the show notes so that you can easily find out how to sign up for them or to find out more information about them. Lastly, you're going to be hearing me talk in the intro of this podcast about the men's retreat that I did last year. And I tease that there's another one coming up. Well, I've officially solidified dates and I've booked a ranch for the next one. And so September 20th and 21st are going to be the dates for the second New Masculines men's workshop. Again, we're going to be partnering with horses during this work. It's a beautiful ranch just outside of Portland. It's an amazing herd. It's where we held the last one last year, and the guys had such a great time. So I'm going to have more details coming out in the future, but I just wanted to put that out there so that you can save the dates if you're interested. That one is the only one that is a men's only retreat. The other two options are co-ed. Anybody can sign up for them. But if you're a man that's looking to dive into this work a little bit more, September 20th and 21st in the Portland, Oregon area. More details to come, but save the dates for those. Now let's get into this episode. Welcome back, and thanks for continuing to listen. Now, you have all heard me talk about the coaching work I offer that includes horses. Maybe you remember I offered a men's retreat with horses last year. And there may or may not be a second one in development for later this year. Wink, wink. But maybe it's still hard to wrap your head around what this type of work is even about. Well, to help it make more sense, I thought it might be fun to invite some men onto the podcast who have experienced this type of work with me to hear their experience, reflections, and insights. My next guest, Doug Wubben, was a participant in a retreat I had the pleasure of co-facilitating with my friend Sarah Papp back in November 2023. While I didn't know Doug going into it, we had an impactful experience together that I hope he'd share with you all. Lucky us, he agreed. A little about him. Doug has done everything from organic vegetable farming, providing in-home care for those who are differently abled and for those who are dying, nursing, working on hospital-wide cultural change initiatives, and is now a coach. When I asked him about his identities that connect him to a sense of the masculine, he chose father, spiritual being, and backpacker. Enough about me trying to tell you about him. How about we just get him into the new masculine so we can hear directly from him? Thanks for joining me, Doug.
Thank you, Travis. Such an honor to be here. Love being able to have a conversation with you today.
I'm so excited for it. As we were kind of talking before we hit the recording, it's fun to like just get together and have some coffee and be able to unpack an experience we had a couple of years ago that, was impactful and powerful, and also life moved on from. And it's like, oh, let's go back and unpack that moment. Let's touch back in with it.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that.
Is there anything I didn't? It was fun to kind of dig into your background. It's many things I didn't know about you. Like we got a full day together and we got this like intimate, cool experience, but there's so much of each other we don't actually know. So it's fun to learn more about you as we go.
Yeah, yeah. I've been through a number of transitions. I think that's one of the things that attract clients
Mm,
to me, the variety of experiences that I've gotten to have and continue to get to have.
yeah, beautiful. Well, hopefully we'll get to learn from you and your skillful way of moving through transitions in this
Or
conversation.
skillful or less skillful, depending on the time. Yep, you betcha.
Fair enough. All right, so let's jump into the conversation about masculinity and what this podcast is all about. I'd love to hear some of your like growing up stories about what you were learning about being a man, what you thought you needed to be in order to be manly as a boy. Tell me what comes up for you.
Yeah. Well, I loved putting some thought into this, and some of my earliest memories of when I was little, like even like less than five, uh, definitely brought forward. I was a very shy, very sensitive, uh, gentle kid. I was the oldest. Loved taking care of my little sister. Love. This gives you a sense of where of a time where mom was able to give me an envelope with some money and the little red wagon, and I would walk down like 4 blocks to the corner store and hand the money and the note to the owner, and he would load up my little wagon with some groceries, and then I would bring that back home. So just imagine a time and a way of living where a 4.5-year-old could like do that on their own and it would be safe.
I was thinking
So
how
I love
charming
being
that sounded, and then you say 4.5. I'm like, whoa, 4.5-year-old. Wow. This is all in Wisconsin, or where were you at this time?
this was in Dubuque, Iowa.
Okay.
So I grew up in Dubuque. Um, and so yeah, I loved being responsible. Um, I was a sweet little kid, and uh, and then one of my earliest memories of like that not being okay to be all those things uh, was, I think it was kindergarten, because I was still living at that place, and there was this boy that I had to ride to school with, and I think he was either a first grader or he might have been just a larger kindergartner. He was intimidating nonetheless, and uh, did something to bully me. I don't even remember exactly what. I just remember the feeling of being scared of him. And and so then I started to feel like I had to just not show everything and protect myself and be on alert. And and like all kids go through this, like when you go into school, I need to be alert. I need to be alert of what's happening around me and how I'm interacting and all of that. But that was an early experience with bullying. And I feel like that was kind of the thread that I started to tug on as I was reflecting on some of my early experiences.
What were some of the things that that kindergartner was aware of that he shouldn't show or that he should hold back on? Like it's funny to think like that in that at that young we have a sense
Mm.
of what we need to protect or hide. What did he think he needed to protect and hide?
Yeah. Um, that he was bothered, that
Mm,
he was intimidated. I think that's what comes to mind first. Like this thing is happening, this person is saying or doing or whatever they're doing that feels like bullying to me, feels intimidating. And the imperative for me was to not show that I was bothered.
mm. Do you have a sense of like what it would mean if you had shown that you were bothered?
Yeah, it just feels like it makes you more vulnerable
Hmm.
to receive more. Um, mhm.
It's interesting how early on our relationships with other boys and men becomes about trying to understand the power dynamics that are playing out. Who has more power? Who has less power?
Oh
Who,
yeah.
yeah, who's the alpha? Who's the beta? It's like constant. And it's from that so early on, we're trying to figure that power dynamic out.
Constant. Like as I thought about even through grade school, I was the smallest kid. Like I was really little. I was always the smallest. There was Joe, and he and I would often like match up and be like, "Am I taller yet? Am I taller than Joe yet?" Nope, nope. I was always a half
Competition
an inch.
always.
Always. And that half an inch made all the difference because that meant I was the smallest. And
Uh-huh.
so I was, I always felt at risk of being targeted
Mm.
because of that. And then because of anything else that might happen. So yeah, that constant vigilance to being on the lookout so that I wasn't being targeted. Even targeted meaning shunned, made fun of, or with physical violence. Like
Mm.
it just felt like a constant possibility and that I needed to be on the lookout for.
Now we'll get into your adult self now in a little bit more in detail, but I'm curious to know, is that something you still carry with you, that alertness, or is that still been something you've navigated in your adult life, that feeling of being at risk or needing to protect yourself more?
I mean, it's very different now. I'm taller, for one. I grew up.
Kindergartners no longer scare you.
uh, yeah, I mean, I'm a almost 6 foot white heterosexual man in a culture that provides me a ton of privilege. And
Hmm.
so I get to experience a lot of that. And yet, still, in certain circumstances, amongst a group of men, for instance, um, that vigilance will come back and we'll be like, okay, what do I need to be aware of here? Um, so it's there, but it's not a daily experience.
I think that's such an interesting place for all of us to explore. My version of it being a tall, white, cisgender man, I have a lot of privilege in this culture, but there are also disenfranchised parts of myself being a gay man in this world. And so it's interesting to explore that ability to hold two truths at once, that there's this part of you that has so much privilege and that is offered so much of that in this world where the world kind of just works in your favor. And also these disenfranchised parts of us, or these like little kids we bring along with us from our childhood that felt at risk, that have had to learn some protective strategies that may have worked in some moments, but may be getting in the way of our like ability to connect now in the future, like in the present time frame. It's just interesting to reflect
Yes.
on both of those truths being true at once.
Yeah, absolutely. How it gets in the way of connecting. So always needing to evaluate, particularly with men.
Hmm.
So always needing to evaluate, is this person a threat or not? How much of myself is it okay to show? Um, and the threat of physical violence is much less now, um, simply because I don't find myself in situations where that's a real risk. And of course, I'm very choosy about who I spend time with.
Hmm.
But still, whenever we meet someone new, those are some of the filters that have to be run through first. And it's just such a shame that
Mm.
that has to be the first step.
Hmm. It's interesting because I think I've heard a lot of my female friends, the women in my life, have
Mhm.
said similar things when going into relationships with men. Is that there's always this sort of like, we have to be choosy with who we're with. We have to be aware of the risk factors that go into it. And I do think that's really sad that that is the starting point for so many of us as men to man, but also other people, regardless of their other identities, feeling that place of risk at the beginning, rather
Mhm.
than that place
Mhm.
of like ability to connect and see about compatibility and stuff. But we're actually really reflecting on risk at those points.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious, like as I've thought through, like I'm wondering, I mean, I know that that's a extremely common experience for women because the risk is real and the risk is often present. So, um, and I've wondered, is my perception a bit warped? So from my own experience experiencing bullying, right? So because I have a particular story, and I imagine some of the other boys that I grew up with might have a very different story. And I don't really know. Um, it seems to be somewhat universal that no, boys are aware of
Mm-hmm.
like positioning, competition, not being targeted, uh, where you want to be in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing that came to me thinking about this was the dilemma that was often created. So out on the playground, someone else gets targeted. And then there's this reaction in me at that moment of one, relief that it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And two, uh, I don't want that person to be targeted either. And, but I don't want to speak up because I don't want to be targeted.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this dilemma that gets created. And that's one of the through lines that came through for me thinking about my adult experiences with men and trying to have conversations about how to confront, how to try to hold other men accountable, or how to just speak up when I feel uncomfortable in situations without disconnecting,
Mm-hmm.
without it's less about being targeted because I'm just old enough now like I don't care as
Mm-hmm.
much, right? Like if someone doesn't agree or doesn't uh agree with anything that I have to say or how I am in the world, like I just care a lot less about that. um but I certainly care about the connection, and I certainly care about any men that I'm trying to create connection with in terms of relationship, in terms of trying to shift things in the culture.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to a conundrum that I hear a lot of guys saying, or a lot of people in our current culture, like that is pretty brittle right now, and that is pretty like divisive, and we've kind of vacillated between like call out culture, like calling people out for their bad behavior and then canceling people, and then the online discourse that happens around things and the divisiveness that's a part of our culture. It's like it's really hard to navigate all of that and to feel both of those feelings that you were talking about, that relief that you're not the target, that
Mm.
you're not the one needing to go through the fear that many of us carry around, which is social isolation or rejection or abandonment. But also this recognition, though, well, if I don't want to feel that, maybe this person shouldn't have to feel that either. And how do I participate in that? How do I show up in that to interrupt the rejection or abandonment or the thing that's happening? And I think a lot of people feel that way and they get stuck knowing what to do next.
Mm. That's going to come up later when we talk about the horse.
Good.
Yeah, this feeling of being stuck. So yeah, had that feeling a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and then often choosing the path of safety for me, and then having some shame kind of like get tapped into about that.
Yeah, it
Um,
makes sense. I think most of us pretty naturally choose the path of least resistance, the path
mhm,
of safety
mhm,
for ourselves. It's a part of that human experience to protect ourselves. And also, really interesting the shame that comes along with that at times, too, to recognize where we feel inclined to step forward rather than step back. The moments where we
mm,
feel we do have power, authority, privilege, something that we can utilize in that moment to help someone else with, and we sometimes choose not to utilize it because of the discomfort that shows up for us.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's complex, and I
Yep.
think that people have a lot of ideas about what the right and wrong ways of doing these things are, and it feels so high risk, the choices we make in those moments. And sometimes it is, especially if you're visible to other people or you're online or anything like that. Um, but I just like to give people like reassurance that it is a complex thing that we're trying to assess in each moment, and that there maybe aren't as black and whites of rights and wrongs, and that sometimes we don't have access to the sense of ourselves that are privileged or that have power in this culture, and we're really in a scared part of ourselves that needs safety first before we can do anything that steps forward.
Yeah. Yeah. The parts work is just so helpful
Mm,
in this regard. Like what part of me am I in right now, and and where am I acting from? Um, that I think there's a key in there to help um, release the shame, because when we think it's our adult uh, self that's connected to our higher self, and that one's acting badly,
mm-hmm,
then if we think that's the one that's showing up and acting this badly, then
mm-hmm,
there's a ton of shame around that.
totally.
And if you can tap into the idea like that's not who's acting right now, like it's this little kindergartner that's showing up
Yeah.
and is like, oh, well, I can have some compassion for him. Jesus, look at him. Look at what he's dealing with.
Yeah. I'm glad you are at the stage in your journey where you can have compassion for the kindergartner. I don't know that all men are able to do that, to really see their younger self with compassion. They actually, because so many young boys aren't met with compassion, they're met with like, do better, achieve, you need to win, you're the
Yeah.
smallest person in here, you need, like, we drive little boys pretty often.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not sure that everyone has access to that compassion energy that can choose softness in that moment rather than kind of more intensity toward the little boy.
Yeah. Yeah. If I have one desire for having impact and for the rest of my life as a coach, it's to help people find that.
Hmm.
Because when anybody does, but especially the men that I work with, when they're able to find that, um, a lot of relief comes,
Yeah.
and a lot of, and then once you can find that compassion for him, that opens the door to so much compassion, just period.
Hmm.
And it starts to flow, has been my experience. It's been my personal experience. It's been my experience with some clients too. Yeah. I had
Why
a
do you
thought.
why do you think compassion is so vital in that space?
Hmm. I think compassion is so vital, just period. Like, I think it's the antidote to so much. I mean, um, and one of the things that's allowed me to tap into it is just also noticing like just the absurdity of the rules.
Hmm.
Like, and I remember this, I remember being aware of it on some level as growing up, but I specifically remember a moment in high school where uh, I'm at a fast food joint with my buddy. We just finished playing tennis, and he decides that he needs to pick a fight with these two kids that are from another school that are at the fast food joint. So out to the parking lot we go afterwards, and it's him and this other dude squaring off. And I'm horribly uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, I don't want to be here, but I certainly don't want to look like, it's like all the things coming in. It's like, well, I want to be supportive of my friend, and I don't want to look like a wimp, and I don't want to, but I don't want to, certainly don't want to get involved in the fight. Like, I'll probably get my ass kicked, and that's not me. And right, like all of these things. So they're there. they're starting to square off and starting to do their thing. And one of the other guys that's a friend of my friend's opponent started to take a move to step into the fight. And all I did was and it was just like an instinctive, like I put my hand like up in front of him to motion, no, this is like, you can't go in there. And thank God he didn't turn to me and then start fighting with me because of course that was the risk in that moment. That's all I did. That's what happened. The fight kind of fizzled out. It didn't really go anywhere. But next day at school, holy cow, I had some guys coming up to me just like, wow, man, like what an amazing move that was. Like we heard about what you did and all of this like uh praise and pats on the back for uh showing up in that way. And I simultaneously was like, well, thank God you don't know like how I was actually feeling in that moment. To, um, wow, this feels kind of good. This is like, wow, like there was like this little bit of like, oh, I made it. Like there's a way, like if you follow the rules and you make it into the man club, this is what it can feel like. And
Mm.
it feels, uh, I felt accepted. And at the same time, I was like, how freaking absurd. Like, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And the man group that I just got accepted into in that moment, which of course is completely tenuous, right?
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
can go away the next second.
Yeah.
As soon as someone else be like, well, yeah, Doug did this, but blah, 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 whatever, right? Like it just um, that's not a club I wanted to be in. So there was this simultaneous, like, oh, I got a taste of what that could feel like. And I want nothing to do with this. I want
Mm.
nothing to do with these rules. I don't want anything to do with this club. Get me out of here.
Hmm.
And that's pretty much how I felt the last 2 years of high school was like, get me out of here fast as possible.
That's so interesting how sort of the external validation you received in that moment, how convincing that is of like, yeah, I'm accepted. I've arrived. I'm a man in this moment. And then like the quick sort of recognition of how flimsy that acceptance and the belonging is, and how it's really, I think, tricky to kind of balance between that, how convincing that acceptance can feel as like the arrival, and
Mhm.
also those moments of seeing through the game that's being played. And I think that's true of most sort of external feedbacks that we get are given, whether we're told we're attractive, whether we're told we're good at something. It's like we can also be criticized. We can also be rejected. We can also lose our attractiveness. We can, like, there's so many things that when we're reliant on an external validation and an external agreement of belonging,
Mhm.
that it's a hard game to play because it can always be taken away. And I think at a core level, that's that existential thing that we're all playing with around, is like around belonging, is someone else could take this away from me. And
Yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah. And it requires constant vigilance
Yeah.
to make sure I'm following. And I've heard it described as like a lot of men, maybe most of us, I don't know, like kind of walk around with like there's this council,
Uh-huh.
probably of all men,
Mm-hmm.
that are like observing at
Mm-hmm.
all times.
Mm-hmm.
Are you making it? Are you making it? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it right? And and I think that's an interesting thought. Like, what's our relationship to that council?
Uh-huh.
It's like, do we care?
Uh-huh.
How much power do they have? Uh, is it constant pressure or is it just like light advice? Right? Like, it'd be
And it might be
interesting.
interesting for guys just understanding this concept for the first time, like to even getting curious about who that board is, who that group of guys is. Is it your dad? Is it your uncles? Is it your high school bully? Is it your
Yeah.
sibling? Like, who are the people that make up that group that are advising
Yeah.
you at all times? Because it might be interesting to, as an adult, be able to look at that and go, is that still who I want to be on my board of advisors? Is that still
Exactly.
what I'm aiming for? And maybe the answer is yes to some, but maybe it's no to others, and you want to replace with new figures that fit into that space.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of just creating awareness around this so that we
Hmm.
can be like, make a different choice.
You mentioned before, well, in a previous conversation between us, that your current relationship to masculinity is a little bit maybe like you kind of lean away from it, or the masculine is something that you're kind of like, not sure about. Tell me a little bit about what your current relationship is like with masculinity.
Yeah, I think the question was, yeah, like what just what you said. What's your current relationship to masculinity? And it was like, uh, ambivalent, as distant as I can possibly make it.
Yeah, yeah.
As like I don't want to think about it. And I think part of that is I think there's different layers to it, but part of it is this. It's such a it has been just such a game, and it's just such a setup. It's a setup. It's a setup for men. It's a setup for me to try to like think that there's a way to make it into some club that's even desirable.
Mm,
And then to see how so many men who are like following those more traditional rules, how much harm that they end up creating all around them, to themselves, to the people in their lives, especially to any women in their lives. Like there's so much, well, to everybody. So, and I'm clearly coming from this. So that's my little one jumping in there, being like, "Yeah, don't forget about the bullies."
yeah.
Yeah. So, so there's that piece. Um, but on the flip side, like my relationship, how I think about masculinity now is just one half of what is in all of us.
Mm,
So, and this came from an interview that you did
mm,
on your podcast, actually, because I mean I've heard it before, but it was most recently brought to my awareness from you, thinking about things from a more energetic perspective, and I think from a more spiritual perspective. So we all have masculine and feminine in us, and what's the balance, and what does that mean? And in that perspective, it's bringing forth the more positive qualities of masculinity. So being careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
mhm.
So yeah, my initial reaction to that question is ambivalence, and I was like, ugh. But that's like, that's the part of me that's just like so over
Mhm.
all the negative aspects of it that have been, um, yeah, pounded into us. It's how it feels. Like, even if that was not a literal term, but just pressured
Pressured into
into
us, yeah.
us.
I
Yeah.
think it makes sense that sort of natural reaction there is to sort of reject it, especially in our current like where we've been in like a culture talking about men and masculinity and toxic masculinity and the Me Too movement. And there's so much criticism of men and masculinity as a part of the conversation. And I think there is also this like almost pushback now that's starting to surface around like men don't know what to do with all that criticism and feel like they're under attack in that. And
Mhm.
so it's sort of like it makes sense that for those of us who are trying to stay conscious in this, that we might internalize that all of it's bad and we need to throw all of it out. I don't necessarily believe in that because I don't want the women in my life to throw away their masculine energy. I don't want them. Some of my best friends have been masculine women. I've loved having women in my life that have a strong masculine energy because I get all of the masculine energy that I'm looking for, but with the safety with a woman, with
Mm,
with the
mm,
with being a gay man, the sort of sexuality piece removed from things. I get to just
yeah.
be in relationship with the masculine in a safer way for me, in a way that doesn't involve other elements of it. So I don't want them to throw it away. So I don't want to have to throw it away myself, but it's maybe learning to find that balance and learning to accept that boys like you and I, we came into the world pretty sensitive and pretty gentle
Mhm.
and pretty sweet and like, and maybe a little left of center when it comes to the feminine aspect of ourselves. And then we were raised in a culture that pressured us to reject that, to push that
Mhm.
away, to recognize that as a risk within us and to hide that part so we can swing into the other part. And so maybe the goal is a reclaiming of more rather than a rejection of one or the other, which is such a human tendency. It's either good or bad. I got to
Oh
get rid of
yeah.
this or I've got to get rid of this.
Oh yeah. I think yeah. And I think a lot of the reaction from some men who are like, we're under attack and like we're not all bad. I mean, I think that comes from a lot of different places. I think there's a lot of genuine men who are just like, I'm just confused. I don't know how to be, help me out.
Hmm.
So some men approach it that way. But I think there's also a component of just kind of backlash, just like there was backlash from the feminist movement,
Hmm.
initially decades ago. And um, so yeah, I love this idea of like, let's just like cut through the shit and like be like, you're not giving something up. Like
Hmm.
this whole idea that like you're trying to feminize me as a man. I was like, oh, come on. Like we're trying to bring in more of your whole humanness.
Yeah,
That's what's at work here.
exactly.
And there's so much beauty and emotion and compassion and joy awaiting when you do that.
Hmm.
And you don't have to lose any part of you,
Yeah.
except maybe the
Yeah.
bully.
It comes, except maybe the bully. Yeah. I'm all for that too. It brings back that compassion word that you brought up first, because like even that pushback movement that's coming in, that men are saying that you're trying to feminize us, and this sort of like anti this movement that's going on. My first reaction is, oh, come on. Or I want to reject
Yeah.
that. I want to say, get over yourself. I want to be, in some ways, I want to tap into the bully in me that says you're wrong and I'm
Oh
right. And
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then when I come back to this value system you were talking about allowing more freedom for the whole human to show up, I can move into compassion where I might be inviting a guy to tap into his more vulnerable, more connected, more supportive, more collaborative sides. But if he has spent his whole life learning to reject that and to learn that that's not safe, of course he's going to say I shouldn't I shouldn't be tap into those skills. And now
Yes.
I can have compassion for the little boy in him that learned that that wasn't safe. And so I think I'm more effective as a influencer, as a person that wants to be a part of shifting and changing cultural narratives around masculinity and men's work, if I can meet him with compassion versus just reject him and cast him off, because that's just perpetuating the bullying that I experienced as a little boy.
Yeah. 100%. But that makes me want to ask you a question
Yeah.
because like it was just like I know you weren't setting this up as an either or, but like either I'm bullying this guy and berating him because in that, so I'll also comment when that happens in me, what I can recognize now is that what I'm doing is I'm bullying that part that still exists in me
Totally.
because that's in me too.
Hmm.
And I um so yeah, when I don't have compassion for that part of that part of that's still in me, then it's so much easier to tap into my own bully
Hmm.
and try to bully any man who's bullying, right?
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
we just perpetuate the cycle. But my question for you is like either we like okay, we come up with that bullying energy toward men, or we tap into our compassion. And my dilemma continues to be, okay, where, because I agree with that. And that's how I approach my coaching and my clients 100%. And it's very effective. And men are starving for that approach. There's this little part of me that's like, yeah, but don't let him off the hook if he's
Hmm.
like doing something that he shouldn't be, or that if he says something that's like, that's just not okay. Like some homophobic comment, and I'm like, am I going to let that slide? Do I say that kind? How do you approach that?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think that it's a zero sum game, in that if I choose compassion, I can't have boundaries or can't have limits
Mhm.
or teach a different way. It's sort of like parenting a child. I can have compassion for a child who's throwing a tantrum, but that doesn't mean that I just let the tantrum win,
Yeah.
or that I let the bad behavior continue. If one sibling's picking on another sibling, I can have compassion for whatever that kid is working through emotionally and regulation of his or her emotions. But that doesn't mean that I don't get to set limits.
Mhm. I
The
like
hard
that.
part is that we don't actually get to control other people's behavior. And so
What?
maybe as a parent, we get to influence our children's behaviors and we can influence
Yeah.
each other's behaviors. But somebody who says something homophobic, I don't know that my first reaction is compassion. So I don't want to set this up in some idealistic mindset
Mm.
that that's where I start from and that I come from and that I don't have internal struggles in that. But if sometimes there's like multiple different categories. Sometimes I recognize that this person and I are just too far apart in our perspective to really have influence over each other. There's nothing that person could say that's going to convince me of the truth of his homophobia.
Mhm.
I'm just never going to accept that. And that's probably true in the other direction too. And so
Mhm.
if we're too far apart, we probably don't have influence on each other, and it can be okay to just go your separate ways. And then there's other times where I can see that there's disagreement between me and someone else about something, but I can feel their humanity and them seeking my humanity as well, where I do think we have influence. And I
Mhm.
think that that's a place of where influence can happen and real conversations and challenge can happen when we're committed to seeing each other's humanity while also being in disagreement about something. Um, I think that that's really hard in our current culture right now. I think so much of our stuff is so divisive and brittle that it's like if you don't agree with me, you don't belong. Um,
Mhm.
and so it does feel like a challenging choice to make to try to see someone else's humanity in that. But that's where I start is to see the humanity, have compassion for the humanity. That doesn't mean I have to agree with them or that I have to not say, hey, that's not acceptable in my space.
I just had a conversation with a client yesterday who was wanting to approach his wife about not setting a boundary, but he was like struggling with like having some time on his own, and he wanted to try to talk to his wife about that, but was anticipating that being met with a lot of resistance. And I was like, how do you think you want to approach that conversation? And he had like a real hint and hope like about it. Like, hey, honey, have you thought recently about how you want to spend some time on your own? And I was like, well, that's a very hinty, hopey way. And I grew up in the Midwest. Like
Uh-huh.
that's our bread and butter. Like
Uh-huh.
that's how we try to communicate about everything. Because
Very indirect.
very indirect, avoiding conflict at all costs.
Hmm.
But it what we ended up talking about was approaching that conversation with connection first,
Hmm.
and clearly expressing your desire for connection. It's like, I love you. I want to spend time with you. I look forward to that. And I'm also trying to figure out a way to have some time for me to take care of some stuff. And uh, he's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I can do that. And um, so that's what I'm hearing a little bit in what you're saying. Like when we are trying to have these connections with other men, there may be some parts of it that we don't agree with. Being clear about what is our intention.
Hmm.
So are we close enough where I'm looking for a connection? That's a desire. And then if it is, just being clear about it. Like, I want to continue this conversation. It's really hard for me to do that when I hear this, or I really want to keep this friendship, but I don't like it when you say this kind of stuff about this group of people. That's not okay with me.
And that's the key right there is sharing how something has impacted me rather than trying to control the behavior of somebody else. That's
Yeah.
the thing is, and I like that word of connection, like being able to, if I feel like we're in a connection and I value it, and you say something that's ignorant or that hits me in a certain way, or that feels homophobic or in some way, if we're connected and I value that connection, I want to offer you how that landed with me. Here's what I made that mean when you said that. Is that what you meant when you said that? Here's what I think going forward I
Mhm.
might need in order to stay connected instead of that very Midwest quality you said. Have you thought about spending some time on your own? Or have you thought about not using that language? Like it's actually about really,
Yeah.
if I need to communicate something, it's because something has been hit within me. Something emotional, something tender has been hit. And that's what I need to communicate about. Something that enrages me, something that crosses a boundary within me. And that's what I want to start with my conversation. But to also reassure that this is a step of me trying to stay connected with you rather than reject you.
It is so difficult for people to learn how to do that. That's the work I do at the hospital. So I still work as a nurse part-time at
Mm-hmm.
the VA hospital. And my work at the hospital is working with clinical teams to increase patient safety by increasing psychological safety on teams so that people are more willing to speak up when they have a concern.
Uh-oh, psychological
And
safety. We're already using those woke words.
yeah.
Uh-oh. Canceled.
Cancel. Oh God. Yep. Um, uh, and the and part of that is reducing the effects of hierarchy. So, like a high reliability organization reduces the effects of hierarchy in the clinical setting and then gives people some language to use to be able to speak up more easily. And it's a very simple tool that we teach, like what I see, what I want, what I'm concerned about, and what I want. And I think one of the things that makes it, and people see that as just way too confrontational and way too direct, especially those who grew up in conflict averse households like me. And where just being direct feels aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just named makes me think one of the reasons that that feels hard for people is because by naming how this is affecting me or what I see, I'm making myself potentially vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm opening myself up. It's like, hey, I didn't see you wash your hands coming out of that patient's room. I'm concerned about spreading stuff around. Could you make sure you wash your hands? And I could be wrong. Like they might have gelled right inside
Mm-hmm.
before coming out, or this might be a doctor that I'm speaking up to, and now I'm worried about getting like ridiculed or ignored. Um, so I think that's one of the things that makes it hard.
It's complex for sure. Social interactions are complex, and the act of being vulnerable in a relationship does not guarantee that we will get what we want or that somebody will agree to the ground rules that we've set in it. And that's the
Mhm.
thing that it's why it's so complex is we're always kind of playing with this piece around social rejection or acceptance.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what's at the core of that. Somebody might ignore me. I might not have any influence. It's a form of rejection. It's a form of you no longer get to decide for me what I should and shouldn't be doing. Um, and it's tricky. And it's not as black and white that if I do this, then everybody will understand and agree in the same way. Like we all come from different cultural narratives. And I don't even mean like cultures that like across the world cultures, but like the Midwest versus the Pacific Northwest versus the East Coast, like different cultural places where norms are established. And so you're doing an initiative that helps lower hierarchies in the system. And yet some people have learned that hierarchies are where safety exists. And so culturally, that person's going
Mhm.
to feel that as a threat. And
Mhm.
so you can have such clarity of this creates more psychological safety. And for that person, it doesn't create psychological safety to
Mhm.
to dismantle hierarchies. I would say probably people in the military can sometimes be more hierarchical in nature, or people that work on like boats where there is a strong hierarchy of needing of a decision making that has to happen. And so some people learn that that is where safety exists. And so it creates less psychological safety for some people. So it is tricky.
Yeah, well, I love the nuance that's coming out here because I get to work with a lot of military and
Hmm.
ex-military at the VA. And what they will say is, and this comes out of the airline industry too, is like, absolutely, you need to have clear chain of command. You need to have a
Hmm.
clear leader. You need to know what roles everyone is serving in. Like, absolutely. Like that needs to be crystal clear. Otherwise, things start to feel less safe immediately. And then at the same time, as the leader, I need to be able to come in and say, hey, everybody, I'm not going to see everything. This is a complex operation that's going on here. I might make a mistake. I might miss something. I'm relying on all of you to speak up if you see something that's missed, and I expect you to speak up. And when people can set that expectation, then so that's a way to reduce the effect of the hierarchy, even though I can still respect that you're in the leadership role.
Hmm.
Um,
It's something we deal with as coaches all the time. People put us in a power spot. Our clients do
yeah,
all the time and an authority that we should know all those things.
yeah.
And I personally believe a lot of my work with people is trying to step out of that power space, to be not
Mhm.
the expert for their life, to empower them to be the expert. Like, we're constantly doing that. That's why this is all complex. And I don't know that we'll all come to a place of agreement, nor is that maybe the goal, because then we're just creating a new cool club to be accepted in. Like, here's the rule that everyone needs to fall into. And
Yeah,
I
I like
think
that.
that it's like almost recreating the thing that was done to us that we didn't like,
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah.
and forcing a new cultural narrative that is that everything is to accept. That's why on this podcast, I don't like to determine for people what the new masculine is, because I don't
Mhm.
want to use that old technology to tell people, okay, now this is what you need to be. And I'm the one that knows all that. I don't know what it is. I'm figuring that crap out too.
I'm
Like,
going to be on your council now.
okay, good. Yeah. Yes, please
In
do.
your head.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much in this that is so
Yeah.
fascinating. And I also really want to talk about the Equus part of things, because that's where our
Hmm.
relationship began. So November 2023, we both show up to a retreat that's put on by our friend Sarah Papp, but I got brought in to do an Equus coaching day with the rest of you. Now, I show up to the group. I knew a little bit of the participants, like through email exchanges and stuff. I could see sort of the makeup, but really it's you, me, and one other guy that's helping me move horses that are the men at this thing, and it's all the rest of us as women. So let's talk about what that experience was like for you. Like, what do you remember from that day?
Um, there was a lot going on that day. I loved being in such a wonderful, well, speaking of safety, like it felt like a safe group, wonderful group, everyone there to learn. The work with the horses, uh, it was fascinating. Well, okay, so many things.
Mm,
I loved watching you with the introductions, like, and
mm,
you interacting with the horse, and to be like, I can make the horse, I can invite the horse to do this and this and this, and then it may or may not decide to go along with me, but then look at all the things that I'm able to influence. Um, and one of the things that I'll never forget is you describing the kind of the energetic field
mm,
around our hearts
mm-hmm.
compared to a horse's hearts. And if I remember right, the description was like our energetic field coming out from around our heart, just in general, is around 10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And that a horse's goes out much, much further, like
50
maybe
feet, I think
50.
is it's the electromagnetic field of the heart. Yeah.
And I just love, and I think of horses that way in any way, but it just helped me tap into this idea of like this overflowing compassion out of a huge heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I think that it's interesting how much of our actual nervous systems are meant to pick up on those things, to be in an electromagnet. It is an electrical system. It will match up with other electrical systems. And so I always find part of what is so hard to describe about the work is that there's something happening in that world, that electromagnetic world, that is not something that we really, many of us consciously understand. Sometimes just standing next to a horse can be transformative in that self without even the mind consciously knowing what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
to give a little frame for the day, and when what Doug is talking about is I start the day by doing a little intro and a little safety demonstration and a little bit of like how to be in movement with a horse and be in relationship. All the work I do is on the ground. So there's no saddle on the horse, there's no bridle on the horse. I even take the halter off the horse, and we're in a sort of an enclosed round space we call a round pen. But um, now you're face to face on the ground with a very large being that doesn't speak the same language as you do, and you have to learn to build a relationship with it, to learn how to communicate within it, to learn how to have boundaries within it if a horse is too close or making you feel uncomfortable, to get movement if you're wanting to express movement, to create safety in moments that you need safety. So I do a little bit of a demonstration in the beginning that Doug is talking about that kind of models a little bit about what's possible, and then I throw each one of the participants in alone with a horse and make them build a relationship. Tell me about what your experience was.
Well, here's what I remember. And I also want to say that I think I kind of completely disassociated at one point. And so if you've got any other memory of detail, please feel
That
free
is
to
my
fill in.
biggest memory of the day, was that I wasn't sure you were fully present in that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got in there and what happened initially was, oh shit, I don't know what to do. And then I don't know what I want to do. What is it that I want to do with this horse? And then like all of this like doubt started to come in. And then as soon as that came in, then I ended up freezing. My memory is like I kind of froze
Mm-hmm.
pretty much right away.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of froze. I was like, I don't know what to do. And so then when I didn't know what to do, instead of like trying this or trying that, maybe I did. My memory is that, yeah, I just froze.
Mm-hmm.
And um and then you came in at one point and you were just like asking me some questions. I think I remember you trying to get me into my body a little bit. Um And what I can reflect on now, so the context for me coming into this, because I think it wasn't just like, I don't know what to do with this horse. And now I'm having this shame storm come up and I'm frozen. Like the context for me was like a month prior to this, I had just ended a 10-year marriage and was coming out of this relationship that I had thought, both my wife and I had thought, because this was not our first go around being
Mm-hmm.
married to somebody. We were like, this is good. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we found it. And we were both super skilled people. So anyway, there was a lot that was going through me around processing all of that. Um, because I can reflect back now, I was like, yeah, there were a lot of moments, especially toward the end, where I was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know how to move out. So there was a lot of frozenness. And so there were multiple layers. So there was like, I don't know what to do. And I feel embarrassed about that, especially in front of a group. And now I'm feeling frozen because I don't know what to do. And oh my God, now I feel shame like times 100
Mm-hmm.
because now not only do I not know what to do, I'm also frozen
Mm-hmm.
and I can't even make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it felt excruciating. That's
Yeah.
how I would describe that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and you weren't the only person that froze that day. And you know, in some ways I try at this point in my facilitation to try not to avoid that. And I know it's possible. And for those of you that don't have a sense of what frozen is, it's another. People commonly know of the fight or flight mechanism that when we're feeling at risk, that we either move into fleeing, running away, which horses do. That's why I interact with them. They're a prey animal. They flee most of the time. And then there's the fight energy that's like move in on something that feels like a threat and try to fight it off. But there is a third option, which is freeze. And for most people, what I hear the description of freeze is it's like driving with the gas pedal to the floor and the brake pedal to the floor. So it's not
Yes.
that, so while you are not moving externally, it is not frozen inside. It is speedy, it
Yeah.
is intense, it is really challenging.
Yeah. What what I remember most from that moment when you came into the pen, because what you would do is you would let us be alone with the horse and just try some things and do whatever. And then if needed, you might come in.
Mm-hmm.
And you came in to support me and asked me some questions. And then I remember at one point you asked me to notice the horse
Mm.
and to notice what the horse was doing. And I hadn't even noticed what the horse had been
It's
doing,
this 1,000 pound
right?
animal standing next to you.
There's a 6,000 pound animal. I'm in a round pen. That's what we're there to do that day.
Uh-huh.
And I had lost awareness. So I was like, there's a horse here?
Uh,
Oh, is that what we're doing? And the horse had moved in a little closer and it was standing. What I remember is standing pretty close to me, not looking at me. It wasn't facing me. It was like it had its side to me, kind of its neck, upper chest region. And you brought my attention to the horse. And I remember you saying, like, what do you notice about the horse? And I was like, oh, there's a horse. I was like, it doesn't seem bothered by what's happening in me. Like, it feels like the whole world should be bothered by what's happening in me because what's happening in me feels big enough to take over the whole world, to
mm-hmm.
affect the whole world. That's how intense it feels. And I was like, but like just a few feet away from me was this creature who didn't seem bothered a bit. And you bringing that attention and then you not being bothered,
Hmm.
like together was allowed me to have just some sense of maybe I don't need to be as bothered, but mostly that I'm not, that I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that whatever I'm feeling shame about, it's okay.
Yeah, from my memory, it's the moment you started to come back into your body. In some ways, you had dissociated. My guess, and this is not just only based on you, but it's the reason why I came into the pen to support and to help out is that sometimes when we confront the unknown, like you're doing something for the very first time, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what measurements of success are available, you don't know how others are perceiving you. There's so much unknown you step into when you do the work that I do, that I have people do. People react to that in interesting ways. Some people go into perfectionist and performance mode. Some people disconnect from everybody else and become very avoidant. Some people dissociate. Some people and leave their body. Some people move into conflict around it. Some people immediately start to cry. Like there's so many different reactions that can happen when we are faced with the unknown.
Mhm.
And when we have to create a way of being in a situation that we're not already comfortable in. And I just think it's really important for men to see how easy it is for all of us to move into our fight or flight or freeze response. Just stepping into the unknown and standing next to a horse can put you in that place
Mhm. Mhm.
to the point where you no longer recognize there's even a horse next to you. You can fully disconnect from the present moment so much
Yeah.
by that process that's playing out within you. And it's funny, it's like the fight, flight, or freeze is really there to help keep us safe. But if we leave the current moment, how are we supposed to stay safe? If this
Mhm.
horse comes running by us and we don't even know there's a horse there, we get trampled. So it's funny
Yes.
that it's trying to protect us, but the actual safest place we could be is if we were really present in that moment.
Yeah, it's almost like it's on overdrive somehow.
Yeah, it was.
Um,
It was on overdrive for you. And
mhm.
that's why I came in was because there's no learning that happens from that place. If
Mhm.
we don't have enough scaffolding, enough, like I always like the sort of when I'm teaching or coaching, I like the student development theory that says that we need the right balance of challenge and support in order to grow. And at that point, you had too much challenge in your way, and you
Mhm.
needed some support in there to come in and help you step into the moment and move through that to come back into your body in a moment that was on overload.
Yeah, and when I think about men and emotions, like there was so much emotion that had been
Mm-hmm.
pent up in
Mm-hmm.
me, and that some of it came out, but even that, it was hard for me to really let it flow in front of a group, even though I'm quite comfortable emoting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think until I get into a spot like that, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not, maybe not so much, and um, yeah, it just makes me think about how many of us have so many pent up emotions that like maybe we're not getting into the full on frozen place that I was, but that there's just some element of that
Mm-hmm.
at work
Yeah.
in the background
Yeah.
a lot of the time that keeps us protected, keeps us somewhat shut down,
Mm-hmm.
keeps us from knowing. Like, so the big learning I took away from that day, reflecting back, was just noticing all the smaller ways that I go into that same state and how disconnecting that is.
I'm really glad you're bringing that forward because I even notice it in myself. I think trying to engage with social media can make you that way. Listening to the news can make you feel that way. Following the most recent drama and the political landscapes can make you feel that way.
Mhm.
Navigating the horrors of school shootings and domestic violence and racial and unjust and
Mhm.
homophobia and the commentary about the trans community, like so much of it puts me into, I can get into that overload place or smaller versions of that. And then I'm just carrying that around in my day.
Yeah, so I feel it's so important to find um so what that experience with you and the horse did for me was like, wow, even in that like incredibly intense uh high pressure place, I was able to get a little bit of release and a little bit of a release valve
Mm-hmm.
was able to be found and opened.
Mm-hmm.
And so then learning to develop that for myself when it's in like in a smaller state or a less powerful state, acknowledging the need that there needs to be this release so that
Mm-hmm.
things can flow.
Yeah. And I think that
So,
starts with what you and I did together, which was to look around, to notice what we
mm,
see. We have to, if you're already in fight, fight, or freeze, the work is to bring the energy down, bring you back into your body, and to be able to come back into the current moment. Because what was happening in that moment was you actually weren't present for the moment.
mm,
And something is being re triggered within you, and the shame comes along with it, and it puts you into overdrive. And so, to me, you're re experiencing something you probably experienced in the past is not connected fully to the present moment. And so some of the work of bringing it down, if you're already in that place, is to really get present in the moment and notice what's around you. I love doing like like checking in with my five senses. What do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste in this moment? What do I feel? I can feel my shirt on my arm. I can feel my pants on my legs. Like really using the body and its senses to get right back into the present moment so that you have access to doing some of that de-escalation work and that that turning the volume down on that piece of things and being able to unpack what's coming up for you in that moment.
yeah, I remember what the image coming to me is like you came in and you had to like throw your hand down in the pond that I had just like
Mm-hmm.
fallen into and like
Mm-hmm.
pull me out
Mm-hmm.
and be like, okay, how are you feeling? What are you noticing?
It'll be interesting, with your permission, of course. I'd love to share some pictures of you with the horse that one of
Mm.
the fellow participants took that I've already gotten permission from her to share.
Oh, for
There's a
sure.
couple of pictures of you that it's funny because in the pictures you look like you're having a great time.
Good.
You're
Yeah,
smiling.
you can share those pictures.
You don't look like you're down in the mud in the puddle, or that I had to pull you out of something. It just looks like you had a good
Uh,
experience. So I think it's interesting, and I think
mm,
coming back to that compassion thing that we talked about, that we don't actually know what everybody's going through in that moment. If I just read your physical, I knew you were fully dissociated and that you were frozen, but I don't know that everybody would have. If you're not paying
yep.
attention, I could have gone in and been like, just do something. I could have been critical of you. I could have been like,
Hmm.
try this, do this. You're not doing anything. Like I could have come in with a
Yeah.
critical approach to it, and that would have worsened it. But if I can see that you are someone who is struggling, even though I know I don't see anything or I don't agree that you should be struggling in that moment, the reality is you are.
Yeah.
And so I can meet you where you're at rather than trying to convince you to be somewhere else. And
Mm.
that takes compassion. I have to have compassion for the person that's struggling right now, who's frozen.
And it's such a wonderful thing we get to do as coaches is to model that and to show others how to do that. Because how often is that the internal voice?
Mm-hmm.
You should be doing this. You should be doing something. Like, come on, like
Mm-hmm.
step up
Yeah.
so much.
It's interesting because I appreciate you sharing a little bit of the context about your relationship that I didn't know about, really going into that, all the things you were dealing with, because that points out it wasn't always just about that moment. You were already carrying around a level of overload emotionally, and that just tipped you over the edge.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I was also at that time, something you didn't know about what I was navigating in that moment was about 10 days before that, my partner had just had a stroke. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I wasn't sharing that with other people. I was in a place that was feeling really ungrounded and insecure about where my life was going, and fears and emotions, and feeling like very like we made a decision for me to go to this, to go do this event, but I felt so guilty leaving. And
Mm.
like there were so many things that I was playing with that could have easily created a place where we were in that puddle together. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we have to be aware of is that like you and I
Yeah.
met and we had an experience together, and yet we had so little context for what each other was going through in that moment. And
Yeah.
I'm really proud of us that we met each other with kindness and care and that we've stayed connected. I'm really proud of those moments, but it could have gone a different way based on the level of overwhelm both of us were experiencing in our lives for different reasons.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I love what you just said a little bit ago, that you just never know
Hmm.
what's going on inside of people.
Yeah.
It's something I try to remind people, especially at the hospital, all the time.
Hmm.
It's like you never know. And I just anymore, because then I do learn, like I just did with you. Like I had no
Hmm.
idea that was happening for you. And now it keeps getting affirmed that I just presume at any given moment there's a lot
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
inside of somebody.
Yeah.
Like, prove me wrong.
Totally. And even for those of us that have skills, like I was the facilitator and coach in that moment. And so of course you
Mhm.
didn't know about that because it's not really my place to come have you
Mhm.
now. You've paid for an experience and now here, help me process my my life shit. But even those of us with skills get overwhelmed, get into freeze response. You're a coach, you have lots of skill sets. You've been doing powerful work in the world, and yet you've got into a freeze response. I think that's the thing that we have
Yep.
to keep in mind is like it's human to get
Mhm.
overwhelmed, to have life push us to the limits, and to need support in coming back to ourselves. And I think that's one of the things that we as men are not really good at is getting help and support.
Mhm.
We have been socialized and cultured to figure it out on our own at all times.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. If there's one thing that I could encourage men to do, it would be find, especially other men, if you can, but just find support,
Hmm.
whatever that looks like. Don't don't be alone. Don't let yourself be alone. If you can.
Well, you read my mind. That's usually how I like to end my conversations. If you have any piece of advice for the guys listening, so thank you for reading my
That's the
mind
big
and
one.
being on it. Yeah, thank you. Anything about your coaching work or any of the work that you're doing in the world that you want to share before we close for the day?
Just that people can find me at dougwubbencoaching.com. I'm easily found, and I currently offer one-on-one coaching, and uh, love working with a range of people. I'm finding more and more men are finding me, but I work with all folks. Um, and yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out. You can sign up for uh, an occasional newsletter that some writing that I put together periodically. And yeah, come find me.
Beautiful. I'll make sure the link to your website's on in the show notes so people can easily find it. Thank you so much, Doug, for being able to share about like your story as a man, to have this fascinating conversation that we've been having. I think it was really nourishing for me to have this conversation, both in the learning more about you, but also being able to come back to a moment that was pretty impactful and powerful between the two of us. So thank you for being up for that and being willing to share that experience with my audience.
Yeah. Thank you, Travis. Really an honor to be here with you.
Yeah. If you want to get connected with me, you go to my website at travisstock.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Travers03. That's where I like to keep the conversation going. So if you have questions or insights that came from this episode, find me there and let's keep talking. And also, if you want to become a supporter of this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/the new masculine. Thanks again, Doug, for joining me. And until our next episode.